Have you ever been thrown off by a subtle look or casual remark during a conversation, leaving you unsettled, or left a meeting or social event wishing you'd expressed yourself better? In those instances, it's not a lack of smarts or effort holding you back. It's the skill of recognizing your own emotions and understanding those of others. Emotional intelligence and social abilities aren't innate talents you're born with. They're disciplines you can train if you have the patience and the courage to face yourself. In this video, you won't just learn about emotional intelligence and social skills, you'll learn how to cultivate them through the lens of Stoic philosophy. Stoicism is an ancient roadmap, one that guided remarkable individuals through fear, pain, and inner conflict by bringing them back to the only place they could truly control within. You don't have to shout to prove you're strong. You don't have to please everyone to be accepted. You just need to recognize where your emotions are leading you and choose to lead them instead. This isn't a feel-good quick fix video. This is a reckoning between you and your truest self. Ready? Let's begin. You can be smart, you can be educated, accomplished, and respected. But if you can't control your anger when insulted, if you can't listen when someone needs to be understood, if you don't know when to speak up and when to stay quiet, then you're still weak. Not because you lack knowledge, but because your emotions control you instead of the other way around. And that's something no IQ score can fix. Emotional intelligence isn't a trendy buzzword. It's the quiet foundation of every healthy relationship, every wise decision, and every resilient mind. What separates us from other species isn't strength, speed, or claws. It's our ability to think, but thinking alone isn't enough. In real life, we rarely act purely on logic. You know you shouldn't eat late, but you do. You know that person isn't worth your anger, but you still explode. You know the meeting is important, but a careless comment can derail your entire mood, and your response ruins everything. The issue is that you know it, but you can't control it. That's the blind spot most of us live with. Emotions are biological data hardwired into our brains for tens of thousands of years. They helped our ancestors survive, fear at strange noises, anger when attacked, excitement when accepted by the tribe. The problem is the world has changed, but our emotional operating system hasn't. You don't live in the jungle anymore, but your brain is still optimized for it. Today, an ignored email, a critical comment, or a polite rejection can trigger emotional storms as intense as any threat to survival. That's why emotional intelligence is a survival skill. Not so you can be better, but so you can suffer less. In a world where emotions are constantly stretched by complex relationships, endless goals, clashing expectations, and everyday conflict, people with emotional intelligence still feel anger, sadness, and insecurity, but they know when they're feeling it. They understand why they feel that way, and they choose how to respond instead of letting their emotions run the show. That's the key difference between instinct and wisdom. Without emotional intelligence, you become a prisoner of yourself. You're hurt by throwaway comments. You let fear dictate your choices. You let pride ruin relationships. You get sucked into endless comparison, competition, and conflict. Worst of all, you think others are hurting you when in reality you've never learned to live peacefully with your own emotions. Emotional intelligence helps you stay grounded in a chaotic world. It keeps you from falling apart after failure. It helps you hold your tongue when angry, stay present when hurt, and wait for clarity before reacting. It helps you understand others not to manipulate, but to truly connect. It helps you reflect before blaming. And most importantly, it helps you find peace without needing external validation. Many people assume EQ only matters in social settings, but in truth, the first relationship it shapes is the one you have with yourself. If you don't understand your own emotions, you'll walk through life like a blind person lost in a psychological desert. You won't know why you're irritable, why you procrastinate, or why you feel exhausted. You won't realize these are signs of suppressed emotions, unmet needs, and unhealed wounds. A truly mature person isn't someone who just pushes through. They're someone who knows how to read themselves. They can pause before reacting. They don't let invisible feelings take the wheel. They stay calm in the chaos, and they accept the truth. Emotions are a part of who we are, but not the whole of us. There's a quiet tragedy playing out in many lives. The more successful someone becomes, the more pressure they feel, the lonelier they get, And the more they're torn between logic and emotion, not because they're weak, but because they've never learned how to decode their inner world. And then they wonder, why am I still not happy even when I have everything? Without EQ, you can lose what matters most without even realizing it. A partner who truly understands you, a reliable teammate, a fragile parent-child relationship begging for healing. All of it can fall apart over one angry sentence or a silence when what was needed was understanding. But when you have emotional intelligence, everything changes. You stop reacting on autopilot. You start responding with clarity. You face your fears and name them. You realize that it's not others who make you suffer. It's how you react to them. And in that shift, you become someone who's harder to manipulate, harder to trigger, and far less likely to lose yourself in life's chaos. EQ isn't a soft skill. It's a survival skill, a core human capability, like knowing how to breathe correctly when drowning in overwhelm. And like any essential skill, it doesn't come naturally. It must be trained, sharpened, and strengthened through daily experience. But to train it, you first have to understand that EQ isn't some vague talent. It's made of 5 tightly connected elements like 5 senses that help you navigate not just the outer world, but your inner one too. The first piece is self-awareness, like turning on a light in a dark room so you can finally see where your emotions are coming from, where they're going, and where they're trying to take you. Next is self-regulation, not about suppressing or ignoring, but knowing when to release, when to hold, and when to turn emotion into intentional action. Then comes intrinsic motivation, the inner fire that keeps you moving not for applause, but for something deeper, quieter, and more meaningful. Then empathy, the ability to read the silences between words, to sense pain behind a smile, and to understand without needing to control. And finally, social skill, the art of connecting without losing yourself, understanding without erasing your own boundaries. These 5 are not separate compartments. They function like an emotional nervous system working in sync to keep you from getting lost in mood swings or social collisions. They aren't just concepts to memorize. They're abilities to activate and maintain through daily practice. And it all begins with a question because no one can change what they're not aware of. All it takes is a moment to ask, what am I feeling? Where is it coming from? Should I act or just observe? And with that, you're already halfway there. From awareness comes training. From understanding comes alignment. That's when practice begins. Practicing timely silence. Practicing the pause that protects your clarity. Practicing seeing others with new eyes, not filtered by old wounds. And practicing honest conversations with yourself every day. Not to become someone else, but to return to yourself clearer and more grounded. The world doesn't need more high achievers who are emotionally unstable. It needs people who truly know themselves, calm enough not to be swept away by other people's emotional storms, mature enough not to fight pain with more pain. And you can become that person starting by accepting that emotional intelligence isn't a nice to have. It's a must-have if you want a life not ruled by your emotions. To get there, you can't skip the foundation, self-awareness. Of the 5 pillars of EQ, this is the starting point, the birthplace of all emotional mastery. Because if you can't clearly see what's happening inside you, you can't understand it, let alone guide it. It's more than a skill, it's a doorway into your inner world. And that's the door we'll open next, enhancing self-awareness. The first step to living as a truly awake human being. The moment you realize you're angry, you are no longer the anger itself. You are the observer. That instant, however brief, is the line between impulse and intention, between reaction and choice. Stoic philosophy never asked us to extinguish emotions like enemies. It teaches us to step outside the wave, to watch it rise and fall without being pulled under. Self-awareness doesn't make life easier. It makes it truer. It's a disciplined act where you dare to face your inner world without flinching. In an age where everything is measured by speed, pausing to feel becomes an act of quiet rebellion. Because if you don't know what you're feeling, you can't understand why you do what you do. And without that understanding, you're not really in control of your life. You're just reacting to it. The mind is like a city at rush hour, loud, crowded, and easy to get lost in. Emotions like anger, sadness, and anxiety show up uninvited. You can't slam the city gates and hope the crowd disappears, but you can rise above, look down, and ask, who's here? Why did they come? That's what emotional awareness is, stepping outside yourself to see what's really going on inside. Psychologist John D. Maya, co-creator of the concept of emotional intelligence, once classified people based on how they process emotions. Some are like mirrors, clear and calm. They know they're sad, they know why, and they move through it without letting it define them. These are the self-aware ones, often with a grounded inner life. Others are like wanderers in the fog. They feel everything yet can't name anything. They drift through emotions like boats without rudders. Then there are those who know they're angry or hurt but do nothing. They accept emotions like sentences handed down without resistance, without release. And there's another group, those for whom emotions feel like Morse code, faint, scrambled, unreadable. People with alexithymia don't lack emotions. They just can't identify or express them clearly. But if you can't name it, you can't manage it. When your emotions drive you instead of the other way around, you lose all sense of direction. It's like misplacing the map on an inner journey. You're still moving, still colliding, but you can't see where you're going. Most people don't realize this until it's already too late. One of the most cited cases in medical history illustrates this vividly, not because the emotion was hidden, but because it may have been neurologically damaged at the root. It sounds like a novel about fate, but it's true. The story of Phineas Gage, the man whose bizarre accident reshaped our understanding of emotional intelligence and self-awareness. In 1848 in Vermont, Gage was a 25-year-old railroad foreman known for being energetic, organized, and trustworthy, a natural leader. While packing explosive powder into rock, an accident occurred. The gunpowder ignited too early, sending a metal rod over a meter long straight through his skull, entering his left cheek and exiting through the top of his head. Incredibly, Gage survived. He stayed conscious, spoke clearly, and could even walk within hours. Physically, he recovered almost fully. But those around him noticed he wasn't the same. He became impulsive, rude, impatient, and prone to outbursts. The man once trusted with responsibility could no longer hold his job. His relationships and emotional control unraveled. It was possibly the first time neurologists and psychologists realized parts of the brain don't just control speech and movement. They shape how we perceive ourselves. The prefrontal cortex damaged in Gage's case is now believed to regulate emotions, plan actions, moderate behavior, and maintain personality. Today, science has gone much further, and debates about Gage's case continue. But it sparked the idea of an emotional and personal control center in the brain. And here's the question that matters most. If one iron rod could disable emotional regulation, how many invisible rods in modern life are doing the same without us knowing? Work pressure, childhood trauma, behavioral patterns etched in youth. These can all become psychic injuries, eroding our ability to observe ourselves. You still show up to work, respond to texts, smile in photos, but inside you've lost track of how you feel or why. That's why cultivating self-awareness is no longer optional. It's a survival skill. If you want to stay connected to who you are, you can't change the past. You can't rebuild your prefrontal cortex like Gage, but you can relearn how to listen to yourself. Each day you can sit down and ask, what am I feeling today? No need to make it pretty, just make it real. When you're angry, pause. Ask yourself, what inside me just got hurt? When you're anxious, don't fake calm. Look directly and say, I'm afraid. Naming the emotion creates enough space so it doesn't consume you. Start by identifying your core values. What matters so deeply to you that it's non-negotiable? Integrity, gratitude, honor. Once that's clear, you'll know how to respond in ways that align with who you are, not just how you feel in the moment. And if you're brave enough, ask someone close, do I let emotions control me? Do I hurt others without realizing it? The answers might sting, but sometimes honest words shine light into parts of ourselves we've never dared to examine. Remember, emotions, whether good or bad, aren't enemies, they're signals. Just as physical pain tells you something's wrong in your body, anger, anxiety, and sadness are messages from within. The question is, will you listen? For Phineas Gage, that door was closed forever due to brain trauma. But for you, it's still there. and you can choose to open it every day. When you learn to name your emotions without fear or judgment, you've already taken a huge step toward mastering emotional intelligence. So what comes next? Once you've seen yourself more clearly, once you've recognized the anger, the grief, the worry, how do you avoid being swept away by it? How do you regulate your emotions with clarity rather than pretending to be strong or shutting down completely? The answer lies in the next lesson. Balance and emotional regulation, where knowing what you feel becomes the foundation for skillfully managing it with depth and with humanity. And together we'll move forward. Once we understand what emotions are, what triggers them, and how they move through our bodies and minds, the next step, and a much harder one, is learning to manage them. Knowing your emotions is one thing. Mastering your response to them is an art of living. One reckless action, a harsh word, an angry glare, a message sent in a fit of rage can unravel everything. A relationship broken, a chance missed, a trust shattered. What haunts us most isn't the situation, but the question that keeps looping in our heads. Why did I let my emotions take control? This is where emotional regulation becomes essential, not as a moral ideal, not as a trendy soft skill, but as a core survival tool in a world where unchecked emotions are wrecking our inner peace and relationships. The Stoics knew this thousands of years ago. They didn't deny emotion. They confronted it, named it, studied it, but refused to be ruled by it. Their calm wasn't coldness. It was the mark of a trained mind. They understood exactly where emotions came from, and they created a small but powerful gap, a moment of pause between stimulus and response. In that gap lies strength. While others are swept away by emotion, the Stoic stands like a stone pillar in a storm. If you've ever exploded over something small, a careless comment, a disrespectful gesture, you felt the force of a tiny part of the brain called the amygdala. According to Daniel Gleeman, this is the seat of all passion, ready to hit the alarm button at the slightest threat without asking for your permission. It doesn't wait for logic. It acts fast and fiercely, often leaving us in a mess we later regret. Gleeman calls this phenomenon emotional hijacking. Imagine driving your life only to be thrown out of the seat the moment your emotions spike. Logic doesn't take over. The most primitive instincts do. Impulsive actions aren't about not knowing better. They're about not having the chance to choose differently. But what if you could stay in the driver's seat? What if in that split second when emotion flares, you could pause just long enough to take a breath and choose a better response? This isn't fantasy, it's a trainable skill. The Stoics practiced it daily, and now neuroscience confirms it. If you can pause for just a few seconds, the brain has time to shift signals from the emotional centers to the rational ones. One of the simplest yet most effective techniques is to count to 5 before reacting. Don't underestimate its power. In the middle of a heated argument, someone who steps outside to breathe deeply isn't retreating. They're exercising control. They're doing something most people have never learned, mastering their inner state. Even President Abraham Lincoln used this technique in his own way. In 1863, after the Battle of Gettysburg, Union General Meade failed to pursue Confederate General Lee, missing a potential war-ending opportunity. Enraged, Lincoln wrote a scathing letter blaming me for losing history's moment, but he never sent it. He folded the letter, sealed it, and wrote on the envelope, "Never sent." Just a few words, but they hold immense wisdom. When emotion takes over, the strongest thing you can do is nothing. Write it out so it doesn't stay buried, but stop before turning feelings into destructive action. Lincoln kept his calm and preserved his relationship with a crucial general. You don't have to be president to practice this. Every day we all have our own letters never sent, bitter comebacks we hold back, judgments we don't speak, cold messages we don't reply to. The real question is, do you choose to react or choose to keep your inner freedom? Another key skill is reframing, changing your perspective. When someone interrupts you in a meeting, instead of thinking they don't respect me, try maybe they're nervous and trying to prove themselves. The event doesn't change, but your perception does. And that shift keeps anger from turning into action. Emotions come like waves, but your body is the first buoy. When you learn to tune into your physical sensations, you gain the upper hand. A clenched jaw, sweaty palms, rapid breath. These are signs you're nearing the edge. Spotting them is the first step toward taking control. In tense moments, grounding techniques can save you. Simply bring your attention back to the now. Feet on the floor, back on the chair, air on your skin. When your mind is in chaos, the body is your anchor. Many see these techniques as mystical or abstract, but they're actually the most practical tools for staying steady in emotional turmoil. Equally vital is managing your stress. You can't control emotions if you're constantly drained. Think of your emotions as a river. If the water level is too high, everything overflows. But if you walk regularly, meditate for 10 minutes, and breathe deeply, you're clearing the riverbed. It doesn't take much, just consistency and awareness. Some emotions are too big to swallow. When that happens, don't suppress, but don't explode either. Write them out, paint them, speak to someone you trust. Unreleased emotions ferment. They don't disappear, they accumulate. And when they do surface, it's usually in the most damaging way. So ask yourself, are you ready to not react right away? Don't dismiss this. In a world that praises speed, those who can slow down are the ones truly ahead. Every thoughtful response is a moment you stay true to yourself. Rash actions may satisfy the ego, but they often destroy what matters most in the long run. Don't mistake emotional control for weakness or lack of personality. The ones who stay centered in chaos are the ones with real strength. When others shout, you stay silent. When others panic, you observe. When others retaliate, you seek to understand. Not because you don't feel, but because you choose a higher quality response. That's not repression, it's resilience. You will slip. You'll get it wrong sometimes, but the moment you realize that, you're already growing. If today you count to 3 instead of snapping, that's progress. If tomorrow you spot stress earlier than today, that's a victory. There's no finish line to this journey, but every step matters. And if you ever need a compass to guide you through emotional storms, remember Marcus Aurelius's words. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. When everything outside falls into chaos, remember you still have one peaceful place left. The choice you make in each moment. Only when you've mastered your own emotions can you truly step into someone else's. That's the next step in building emotional intelligence. Learning social skills to read the unspoken signals in a glance, a gesture, the rhythm of a voice. Because true connection doesn't come from what we say. It comes from what we sense. And once we understand emotions, we can finally start to reach each other. Someone can be brilliant and capable. But if they lack one thing, the ability to read and respond to subtle social cues, they risk being seen as arrogant, cold, or even unpleasant. The irony is, they often don't realize they're making others feel unheard, disrespected, or dismissed. Social skills aren't just about fitting in. They're the conscious, intentional art of noticing, adjusting, and nurturing positive relationships. And they don't stem from being a smooth talker, but from awareness, humility, and sensitivity, hallmarks of Stoic character. Stoic philosophy teaches us that the only thing we truly control is our response. When someone is rude, we can react with anger, or we can stay calm and ask, "You seem off today. Is something going on?" That small choice can disarm the other person and open up a deeper conversation instead of a silent conflict. That's the core of building meaningful connections. Instead of assuming bad intent, we create safe spaces for others to show their better side. This principle is especially relevant in social interactions. You can't control what others think, say, or how they react, but you can choose your response. And that response can steer the tone of an entire conversation towards something constructive. Effective communication isn't about saying everything you think. It's about being understood. Sometimes the clearest communication is in how you look at someone while they're talking. A timely nod can speak louder than a speech. A sincere "I get it" can cool someone's anger. On the flip side, a cold glance, an awkward pause, or a closed-off posture can derail a conversation. Body language is the most honest language. It doesn't lie. We're not born knowing how to navigate emotions in conversation. We learn it, and often we learn it wrong. In many Asian cultures, saying no is considered rude. So people say yes when they mean no. A Japanese person might completely disagree with you, but still smile and nod. A 6-year-old might frown dramatically to show their sadness. An adult might hide deep pain just to save face. These unspoken social rules make it harder to see genuine emotions and turn emotional awareness into a survival skill in today's world. A colleague once told me he nearly lost a major client because he misread the tone of an email. The client wrote, "No need for more details." He felt slighted and got angry, but instead of firing off a heated reply, he called. Turns out the client had the flu, was exhausted, and just wanted to wrap things up quickly. We often judge others too fast based on limited cues. Someone with strong social skills pauses and asks, "What might I be missing here?" In communication, over 50% of the impact comes from body language. You can say, "I'm fine," but your slumped shoulders, flat voice, and averted gaze tell another story. Stoics train themselves to observe. They don't just listen with their ears, they listen with their eyes. They spot the lie in someone's eyes, the worry behind a smile. This isn't overthinking, it's reading the emotional undercurrent, something that only grows in stillness and intentional focus. Think about this. Have you ever walked into a meeting and felt the tension before anyone said a word? Your boss sits arms crossed, face tight, and the room goes silent. That's emotional tone. Someone with high social intelligence can shift that tone with a warm greeting, a light joke, a look of shared understanding. I once met a hospital receptionist who truly impressed me. I arrived right before lunch expecting a grumpy response. Instead, she looked at me, smiled slightly, and said, "You look like you're in a rush. Let me help now so you don't have to wait." I hadn't said a word, but she got it. That's pure social skill, sensing someone's need before they even voice it. And then there are conflicts where social skills are truly tested. You're arguing with someone close. They raise their voice and you snap back. The fight escalates, but then you pause, lower your tone, and say, "I'm not trying to fight. I want to understand what's making you feel this way." That single sentence isn't a tactic. It's a moral choice to choose understanding over dominance. That's Stoicism in action. And it's small decisions like these that build lasting bonds. Have you ever been in a friend group where one person always shows up late, interrupts too much, or never opens up? Eventually, the group drifts away without saying why. That person is left wondering, why am I no longer invited? It's not that anyone hated them. They just didn't realize their behavior was breaking the connection. A bit of honest feedback might have changed everything, but feedback is a skill too. How do you say something so that the other person listens instead of shutting down? For instance, instead of blurting, "You're always late," it's annoying. You might pull them aside and say, "We really enjoy having you around, and that's why it matters when you're late." Everyone ends up waiting a while. Is it hard to make it on time? If needed, we can shift the time a bit. What matters is you being there. That approach isn't just critique, it's care. It shows shared responsibility and gives space for the other person to explain. Most importantly, it doesn't embarrass them in front of others. Another case, a sea orker keeps taking credit for your work. You're angry but don't want to stir conflict. If you stay silent, resentment builds. If you confront them directly, they might get defensive. A socially skilled response finds the middle ground. "I noticed your name came up a few times without mine. Did you catch that too?" Maybe we can agree on how to report things so everyone gets recognized. That's gentle but clear and offers a path forward. Social skills aren't about avoiding conflict. They're about creating space for conflict to be handled with respect and purpose. Strong relationships aren't ones without arguments. They're ones that know how to argue without damage or lingering wounds. Here's a critical question. Are you holding on to certain relationships just to check a box? Or are you intentionally building ones with purpose where both sides challenge, support, and grow together? A real friend isn't someone who agrees with you all the time. It's someone who tells you the truth when you're wrong and still stands by you when you're vulnerable. But to have those kinds of relationships, you need to be that kind of person first. And yes, we have to mention the sting of rejected feedback. I once told a friend he had a habit of cutting people off mid-sentence. His first reaction was anger, but days later he thanked me. No one had ever pointed it out before. People with strong social skills constantly reflect on how they're perceived and have the courage to adjust rather than stay defensive. So if you ask me, how do I develop great social skills? I won't tell you to read more books or attend more workshops. I'll say truly listen to people. Observe carefully. Be willing to adapt with humility and a learning mindset. Let every conversation be a practice round. Let every relationship be a training ground for becoming a kinder, sharper version of yourself. And when you learn to read people, spread positive energy, resolve conflicts gently, offer feedback with care, and build intentional connections, you'll realize social skills don't just help you network better. They help you live more deeply, be more fully present in every moment with others. That's when you're ready for the next emotional level, empathy. Not just understanding what someone says, but feeling what they don't. Not just listening to reply, but listening to resonate. That's the next chapter, and it's where true healing and lasting relationships begin. There are fleeting moments in life, so brief no one remembers them, so quiet no one mentions them. Yet they sketch the emotional map between people, a glance without judgment, a touch without advice, a presence without pressure. These seemingly insignificant gestures often go unnoticed in daily life. Strangely, they are the ones that most powerfully shape the bonds between us. We often believe that to ease someone's pain, we need the perfect words or a quick fix. But in many cases, all someone truly needs is a person calm enough to stay. Not to erase the pain, not to walk away in discomfort, not to say, "I understand," but to be there long enough for the other to feel, "I'm still here." Even if you can't speak yet, empathy is one of the most vital human capacities we can cultivate. And yet it's rarely taught with the seriousness it deserves. It's commonly defined as the ability to sense and understand another's emotions. But that definition falls short. Empathy isn't just knowing someone is hurting, it's also understanding why they're hurting. It's a deliberate choice. The choice to pause, to listen, without fixing, to meet someone with a mind wide open. No judgment, no solutions, no imposing your experience onto their pain. Neuroscientists have identified 3 layers of empathy. The first is cognitive empathy, understanding the reasons, context, and logic behind someone's emotional behavior. The second is emotional empathy, where your nervous system mirrors the state of another. This is why we cry at someone else's grief, even when it's not our own. The third and deepest is compassionate empathy, when understanding and feeling lead to action aimed at easing someone's suffering. The Stoics, known for reason and self-control, did not reject emotion. They simply refused to be ruled by it. Yet the ability to recognize others' emotions and respond with calm and care was a core skill in their philosophy. To a Stoic, empathy wasn't a soft feeling, but a form of alertness, knowing when to be silent, when to stay, and how to draw the line between reactive instinct and intentional action. If empathy is so essential, why do we keep failing at it? Why do we listen but not understand, see but not truly notice, live near one another yet feel miles apart? Maybe it's not about being cold or unkind. Maybe it's rooted deeper in the way the human brain has evolved for survival, not connection. The amygdala, part of the brain's limbic system, is our primitive emotion center. When triggered, it reacts instantly with fear, anger, or excitement before the rational prefrontal cortex has time to weigh in. That means if you feel insulted, your body might already be gearing up to fight or flee before you've even considered whether there was any real threat. This is why so many conflicts ignite not from reality, but from primal reflexes. Empathy, then, is a rebellion against our default wiring. When someone seems cold, it's easy to get angry and label them heartless. But empathy asks you to pause the emotional signal and offer another assumption. Maybe they're exhausted. Maybe they've had a hell of a day. Maybe silence is how they're trying to stay in control. These guesses may not be accurate, but they're bridges out of your mind and into someone else's. One of the most famous neurological cases of empathy deficiency involves patients with damaged amygdalas. These individuals can understand context and logic, but feel nothing emotionally. They don't fear, rejoice, or worry. They can recount a tragic story in a monotone like reading the news. They understand but don't connect, and that ruins their ability to form meaningful relationships. They become precise but emotionally vacant. Talking to them feels like speaking to a machine, flawless but empty. This leads to a crucial insight. Empathy is inseparable from emotional intelligence, and by extension, it is the foundation of social skill. But it's not just an ability, it's a conscious decision. You must choose to listen actively, not interrupting, not rushing to fix, not hijacking someone's story with your own. You must choose to stay genuinely curious. Why does this person think this way? What experience might be shaping this reaction? And most importantly, you must choose to manage your emotional responses to stop yourself from falling into automatic patterns. Wired deep in our neural circuits since the hunter-gatherer age. In one psychological study, participants were asked to simply name the emotion they saw on another person's face. This small act, labeling emotion, reduced activity in the amygdala and strengthened connections between the prefrontal cortex and emotional centers. It showed something powerful. Naming emotion helps soothe it. Saying you look sad instead of stop being negative helps someone reconnect with themselves without a single piece of advice. There's no cheat code for empathy, but you can start with 3 simple actions. 1. When someone shares something, don't reply with your own story. They don't need your narrative. They need your attention. 2. When someone gets angry, look behind the anger. Anger is often just a shield for pain. 3. When someone acts strangely, ask yourself, if I had lived their life, grown up as they did, would I be any different? Don't wait until someone cuts you off without a word. Don't wait until your partner stops wanting to talk. Don't wait until your child says, you don't understand me. Empathy isn't a skill to pick up at the end. It's the groundwork for everything else. Trust, love, collaboration, and forgiveness. You will get it wrong sometimes. You will react before thinking. You may lose a relationship because you failed to notice a silent cry for help. But empathy is a journey. No one is born with it. It's forged in attention moment by moment, day by day. And that very effort defines who you are in the eyes of others. A clever mind or a trustworthy soul. Stoicism doesn't ask you to abandon emotion. It asks you to place it where it belongs. When you understand what causes another's pain, you can live ethically without needing rules, do what's right without craving reward, and build lasting relationships without trying to control anyone. And if you've ever doubted yourself, felt you're not sensitive enough, not deep enough, not attentive enough, start again. Empathy, like any mental strength, only asks one thing: the courage to observe yourself before trying to understand someone else. But to keep observing, to stay grounded in a noisy world, you'll need another kind of strength, a fire that keeps burning even when misunderstood, hurt, or let down. That's why the next lesson matters so much. Self-motivation. No one can truly show up for others if they're running on empty. No one can stay present if they're desperate to escape themselves. And no one can build something lasting without an inner power to keep themselves from falling apart. The 5th and final pillar of emotional intelligence is the ability to motivate yourself. Not the fleeting kind sparked by a motivational video at 200 a.m. Not the surge of energy you get from an epic soundtrack at the gym, but a slow, steady burn, a fire that doesn't depend on applause or recognition. What the Stoics called inner strength. The power to live in alignment with your values. Even when no one is watching, no one is cheering, and no result is guaranteed. Self-motivation begins when you confront the hardest thing of all. Silence, no deadlines, no pressure, no eyes on you, just you and the void. A quiet room, an early morning with no one calling. A long day that you can either waste or make count. It's in those empty spaces that people discover what truly drives them. No external push can sustain you every day. The only thing that can is your reason for being. And this is where most people fall. Not because they're not talented, not because they lack information, but because they've lived too long for other people's expectations. They don't know what matters to them. They can't tell whether they're working out of passion or fear of comparison, whether they're striving for something meaningful or just running from failure. And when no one's around to witness their effort, it all falls apart. Every goal fades. Every promise feels hollow. The body remains, but the soul checked out long ago. The Stoics didn't live that way. They didn't chase results. They didn't demand applause from life. They didn't act to be seen. They acted to stay true to the good within them. That's why they didn't crumble easily. Not because they were stronger, but because they didn't need the world to reward their integrity. They needed no prizes, no audience. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being." That one sentence shatters every modern cliche about motivation. He didn't rise to win, not to impress, not because someone needed him. He rose for one reason: I am a human being, and a human must live like one. No drama, no fluff, just the truth. So how do you build that kind of strength? How do you keep moving when your heart is empty and your mind is numb? Start with this painful truth. You don't have to like something to get it done. That's one of the biggest lies of our time. Do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. No, it's more like do what you find meaningful and you'll have a reason to endure. True motivation doesn't come from emotion, it comes from clarity. A painter doesn't create only when inspired. He paints because it keeps him whole. A father doesn't rise early because he feels excited. He rises because his child needs breakfast. A warrior doesn't draw his sword because he wants to fight. He does it because if he doesn't, cruelty wins. So what about you? What matters enough to keep you going even when you see nothing ahead? Think about those days when you did nothing. Didn't write, didn't learn, didn't work, just sat there scrolling endlessly, feeling empty. How many of those days have passed in your life? And how did you feel going to bed on those nights? Proud, peaceful, or was it that small regret? Not loud enough to make you cry, but deep enough to rob you of sleep? Here's the truth. Every time you procrastinate, you're not just avoiding a task. You're eroding your self-respect. Every time you choose comfort over effort, you send your brain a message. I'm not strong enough to steer my own life. Repeat that often enough, and you'll start to believe it. Every pep talk becomes hollow because deep down you know you're running. And then one day you see someone else succeed. Not because they're better, but because they didn't run. They kept going, tired, alone, and gnawed. They kept going because they once hit rock bottom and realized down there there's no one left to blame, only yourself. And here's what might surprise you. You think you need motivation to act? Number. The truth is, you need action to build motivation. Waiting until you feel ready is a recipe for failure. Action builds momentum. Action builds confidence. Action is how you silence doubt. One small step is still a step. And if you keep stepping, one day you won't need to push yourself anymore. Motivation will follow like a habit. Think of it like an oil lamp. You don't need to fill the whole tank to light it. Just a drop, a match, a spark, and the flame begins. Your job isn't to light the whole room all at once. Your job is to keep that flame from going out. So let's get practical. How do you stay motivated in everyday life? First, stop trying to do everything. Pick the single most important task of the day and do it early. Call it your first win. Second, write down why you started, but don't sugarcoat it. Be honest. If your reason is to prove I'm not worthless, write that. Real motivation doesn't care about appearances. It only cares if it gets you to act. Third, change your environment. Your surroundings shape your mindset. If you're around people who constantly complain, you'll lose faith. If you live in clutter, your mind will follow. Clean your desk. Silence the noise. Clear the outer space and the inner space will follow. Fourth, build a ritual of initiation. A worker drinks a glass of water before starting. An artist plays the same song before painting. A warrior sharpens his blade. These small, repeated actions flip the mental switch. They tell your body it's time to act. Finally, know when to rest. Not all fatigue is weakness. Sometimes rest is prep for a longer war. The Stoics didn't fall because they knew how to recover. No one expects you to be strong 24/7. But you must be honest. Is this rest or is it avoidance? You don't need to conquer the world. You just need to win against yourself hour by hour, choice by choice, morning by groggy morning, moment by moment. When you want to give up but decide to stay. Each of those wins builds someone you can believe in. If you're still here, still reading, I'll leave you with one question today. Did you act on what you believe in or just react to what happened? And if the answer makes you uncomfortable, don't worry. That's a good sign. It means you're waking up. When you learn how to motivate yourself, you're not just strengthening emotional intelligence, you're shaping your character. And from that foundation, we move to the next lesson: how to communicate better in every situation. Because once your roots are strong, your reason is clear, and your actions align with your values, the next step is learning how to express it. Not to win arguments, but to build a real connection. And that's where real change begins. In today's world, it's easier than ever to connect, but harder than ever to truly understand one another. We talk more, text faster, respond constantly, yet we rarely create the space to genuinely listen or to grasp what someone else is going through. That's why communication has become fertile ground for misunderstandings, emotional wounds, and conflict. A careless word can cut deep. A dismissive glance can spark quiet resentment that lingers for days. In a world where speed trumps depth, emotional intelligence is no longer a nice to have. It's a must-have if you want peace of mind and meaningful relationships. Have you ever argued for hours only to forget what started the fight? Or stayed silent when someone offended you, unsure how to react? Or worse, said something that hurt someone you love just because you were tired, stressed, or hurting yourself without even realizing it? We don't clash because we don't care. We clash because in those moments we let emotion take the wheel instead of understanding. That's where emotional intelligence comes in. But it's not what most people think. EQ isn't about bottling things up or being calm like a robot. It's about awareness, self-control, and compassion for yourself and for others. In Stoicism, self-mastery isn't about becoming rigid. It's about making room for genuine humanity. Let's start with a familiar scenario: being insulted. Olivia, a sales rep, just finished a presentation when her colleague Mark cracked a joke in front of the team. I guess Olivia plans to sell this with a smile instead of stats. The room laughs, her chest tightens, her face burns. She feels ashamed, angry, and helpless. She could snap back, storm out, or curse him out. Instead, she simply looks at Mark, smiles, and says, "Thanks for the reminder, Mark. Next time I'll bring the data. Hope you'll still be smiling then." Silence falls. Mark never tries that again. Olivia's response wasn't random. It came from recognizing that someone else's words don't define her worth, and she didn't need to prove how sharp or tough she was to protect her dignity. She only needed to hold on to it. In Stoic terms, that's virtue. Living from your values, not the crowd's reactions. Others can insult you, but they can't take your character unless you let them. Here's another common situation: a fight with someone you love. John and his girlfriend Emily have been together for 3 years. One night after a long day, John comes home to a messy kitchen, no dinner, and Emily scrolling on the couch. Frustrated, he snaps, "What have you been doing all day?" "I'm exhausted too," Emily fires back. "You think I've been relaxing? I know you came home late to avoid chores." A simple moment of need spirals into war when all they really wanted was a hug. If John had a bit of emotional intelligence and a touch of Stoic spirit, he might have paused for just a second before speaking. He might have asked himself, where is this anger really coming from? Is it the mess or feeling unseen? That one question could have changed everything. Instead of lashing out, he could have said, "I was hoping to come home to some peace, but maybe you had a rough day too." And just like that, Emily might have melted instead of exploding. Emotional intelligence isn't just a mental skill. It's the key to transforming fragile moments into moments of deep connection. Another scenario: being falsely accused. Daniel, an international student, is blamed by his group for not doing his part on a project. He knows he did. It just didn't get uploaded correctly. Angry, betrayed, and misunderstood, Daniel wants to fire off an email to expose the group. But then he remembers Epictetus's quote, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." So he writes a brief, polite message to the professor, calmly explaining the mistake with evidence. No drama, no attack. The professor understands. The group stays quiet, and Daniel walks away with something far more valuable than a grade: his peace. So how do we practice emotional intelligence in messy real-life situations? Forget cliché formulas. You only need 3 things: Pause, name the emotion, and act with intention. Pause means don't react instantly. Step back and observe. Naming the emotion means admitting I feel hurt, I feel jealous, I feel afraid. That alone softens its grip. And once you see it clearly, you can choose your next move. Not out of habit, but out of who you want to be. Ask yourself, what's your goal in every interaction? To prove you're right or to make the other person feel heard, respected, and trusted? What matters more, winning the argument or keeping the person you're arguing with? Sometimes what you need most in a fight isn't a clever comeback, but a deep breath. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is not to respond immediately, not chase the last word, not demand to be understood right away. That's when you step into the depths of emotional intelligence in the heart of Stoicism. Because the truth is, conversations don't break down because we don't know what to say, but because we're too ashamed to say what needs to be said, afraid that admitting we overreacted will make us look weak. But no one is truly weak for saying, I was out of line. Emotional intelligence isn't perfect control. It's knowing when to let go of your ego. In Stoic terms, dignity doesn't mean being always right. It means being humble enough not to need to be. That's when you no longer need to win. Pride pushes you to argue, to dominate, to be on top. Emotional intelligence, true to Stoic thought, asks, is that win worth the cost of losing someone? Real maturity isn't about never getting angry. It's knowing when to stop, even when you're capable of crushing the other side. And that kind of restraint earns more respect than any mic drop moment ever could. In the end, communication isn't about showing off. It's about showing up. The best communicators aren't the ones who talk the most, but the ones who understand their own emotions and others and choose their words with care. And if you think this only matters in your personal life, you're missing the harshest proving ground of all, the workplace. There you deal with people you don't like, sit through meetings with backstabbers, and smile at clients when you really want to scream. That's not theory anymore. It's real life. It's where emotional intelligence becomes a survival skill, and more than that, a growth strategy to thrive with wisdom, resilience, and quiet strength. So are you ready for what comes next? In the modern workplace, emotions are often treated like background noise, something to be silenced or ignored, as if reason alone could navigate every decision. Conference rooms lit by sterile LEDs, spreadsheets loaded with metrics, handshakes that feel more like cold contracts than human connections, all seem to declare emotions have no seat at this table. But the truth is, emotions are always there. They breathe under deadlines, stir in team dynamics, and shape every unspoken hesitation. The difference lies not in whether we feel, but in who recognizes those feelings first and who knows what to do with them. Emotional intelligence, so often overlooked compared to IQ or hard skills, is the quiet engine that powers cohesive teams, resilient leaders, and workplaces that actually work. A leader who understands their own emotions won't let a meeting derail because of a personal frustration. They won't make important decisions when their judgment is clouded. They sense tension before it erupts. And they create space for others to be heard, not because it's in the manual, but because they know it matters. This isn't softness, it's wisdom in action. Emotional intelligence in leadership isn't about sugarcoating difficult conversations. It's about making sure those conversations land where they need to. Criticism like you're messing everything up might feel blunt, but it does more harm than good. It shuts people down. But shift the language. You did this part well. Here's where we can improve. And I believe you can do it. And now you're not just pointing out flaws. You're building a bridge toward progress. You're leading with clarity and care. That's why companies that look beyond the surface are placing emotional intelligence at the center of hiring. Skills can be taught, but EQ, it shows in how someone handles pressure, how they respond to feedback, and how they repair tension before it becomes conflict. A brilliant engineer might write flawless code, but if they can't communicate ideas, manage disagreements, or sense the room, their brilliance becomes a bottleneck. When every team member operates in their own emotional silo, the organization doesn't scale, it fractures. And this becomes clearest in moments of stress. Heated meetings, subtle rivalries, deadlines that turn colleagues into competitors. Here's where EQ becomes the differentiator. Someone with low EQ reacts defensively, dismissively, or withdraws. Someone with high EQ pauses, observes. They shift perspective. They ask not who's to blame, but what's really happening here. Instead of using power to control, they use connection to lead. They don't suppress emotion, but they don't let it take the wheel either. And EQ doesn't just belong to managers, it belongs to everyone. The newest hire can bring EQ into every interaction. The intern who listens deeply, the teammate who notices when someone's off and checks in, the colleague who chooses to respond calmly even when things get tense. These quiet decisions repeated consistently create environments people actually want to be in. But here's what EQ is not. It's not a checklist item from a weekend workshop. Emotions don't work like bullet points. They live in the day-to-day. How you show up after a failed pitch, how you handle miscommunication without turning it into blame, how you navigate feedback that stings but still stay open. Building EQ is not about being less emotional. It's about being more aware of your emotions and choosing your response with intention. Think of that person in your workplace whose presence steadies the room. They may not be the loudest, smartest, or most charismatic, but somehow around them people breathe easier. That's EQ. It's the ability to hold space, to speak the truth without harming, to remain firm without becoming rigid. These people don't shout their value. They radiate it. And in diverse teams, diverse in background, beliefs, age, identity, EQ becomes not just helpful, but essential because diversity doesn't magically lead to inclusion. Inclusion takes work. It takes recognizing your own bias before it colors your actions. It means calling out subtle behaviors that harm, not to shame, but to prevent harm from spreading. You can't control the feelings you were conditioned to have, but you can decide what kind of impact you want to leave. Zoom out further, and there's something even more powerful. Group emotional intelligence. It's not about whether individuals are brilliant, it's about how they work together. The smartest teams don't just share goals. They share trust. They disagree without personal attacks. They speak up without fear. They resolve tension before it becomes resentment. In these teams, emotional awareness isn't a side feature. It's the operating system. So where do you start? Not in theory, but in experience. In your next meeting, pay attention not just to what's said, but to how people feel. When someone disagrees with you, notice your first impulse. When you feel overlooked, observe before you react. Those moments are the practice. Each time you choose understanding over reaction, clarity over ego, you're strengthening the part of yourself that no one can outsource or automate. Because your career won't be defined just by results, but by relationships. Not just by what you achieve, but how people feel working alongside you. People won't always remember your exact words, but they'll remember how calm they felt when things got tough, simply because you were calm. And the truth is, EQ doesn't stay in the office when the day ends. It walks with you into the kitchen, into late-night conversations with your partner, into the quiet moments with your kids when they need more than just advice. They need your presence. If you think managing emotions at work is hard, try it at home where the stakes feel more personal and the masks come off. That's the next challenge. That's where the true test of emotional mastery begins. In the next lesson, emotional intelligence in personal and family life. We go deeper because the real battlefield isn't the boardroom. It's your living room. No place tests emotional intelligence more than home. It's where love isn't bound by contracts, where words can cut deeper than steel, and where even the smallest action can leave a lasting mark. We can keep cool in high-stakes meetings. We can smile at difficult clients. But when the door closes, when it's just us with our spouse, our kids, or our closest friends, that's when emotional intelligence faces its true trial. And in those moments, Stoicism isn't just a philosophy, it becomes a lifeline. Picture this. It's evening and you come home exhausted. Your mind is racing, your shoulders heavy. Your partner says something that sounds harmless, but it hits you like a critique. Your heart rate spikes. You snap. You always do this. And just like that, a spark becomes a wildfire. That's the moment a choice was missed. The choice to notice the rising emotion, the choice to pause, the choice to respond not from a wound, but from self-control. A person with high emotional intelligence doesn't avoid anger. They stand steady within it because they know emotions are data, not commands. In a marriage, EQ is the space that lets conversations continue even when emotions threaten to end them. It's the bridge between two complex inner worlds, where we don't just speak to be understood, we learn to listen to understand. A simple question like, "How are you feeling right now?" can be what saves a relationship from drifting apart. A silent handhold after an unfinished argument can say, "We may disagree, but we're still on the same team." This isn't just theory. Here's a practical tool you can use today. Create a pause signal with your partner. When one person feels overwhelmed, they're allowed to signal for a 10-minute break, not to storm off, but to step back and regain clarity. Many marriages don't need more advice. They just need 10 more minutes of silence timed right. But emotional intelligence isn't just for love. It's just as vital in friendship, where we often forget that even our closest friends have their feelings, expectations, and wounds. EQ is what keeps bonds from breaking under the weight of repeated minor misunderstandings. Have you ever lost a friend over a message left unanswered? Maybe you thought they don't care anymore, but maybe they were also waiting for you to ask, "Hey, are you doing okay?" EQ helps us notice the growing distance before it becomes too wide. Here's a simple but powerful practice. Instead of saying, "Why have you been so quiet lately?" try, "I miss our long talks. Are you okay?" Shift from judgment to connection, from demand to care. That's the heart of emotional intelligence. And when it comes to parenting, that's EQ's longest game. Kids don't learn from what we say. They absorb how we live. If we snap at them for being slow, we're teaching that anger is how to handle imperfection. But if we kneel, look them in the eye and say, "I see you're upset about parting with your toy," right? We're giving them the vocabulary to name what they feel, and naming it is the first step to mastering it. Children don't need perfect parents. They need parents who can apologize. Have you ever said, "I raised my voice earlier because I was tired, but that wasn't okay. I'm sorry"? That small act teaches more about integrity than 100 lectures. On the flip side, when we don't allow ourselves to be wrong, our kids learn to hide their mistakes or blame others. A vital tool in building EQ in children. Turn emotions into daily language. Instead of asking, "Did you have fun at school?" ask, "Was there a moment today when you felt angry or sad? What did you do then?" These questions open the door to a child's inner world without pressure. When kids learn to speak about their feelings, they don't need to shout or misbehave to be heard. EQ isn't a weakness. It's strength that keeps its shape in life's most fragile moments. In tense situations, people with high EQ don't suppress their feelings, they steer them. They know anger isn't the enemy, but letting it take the wheel always leads to a crash. What shocks many is this: we often treat the people we love the worst, not because they deserve it, but because we believe they'll forgive us. That safety makes it too easy to let go, lash out, and hurt. But familiarity isn't a free pass for disrespect. It's a reminder to be more mindful, more gentle, because the ones closest to us are also the easiest to wound. And emotional intelligence begins the moment you pause and ask, "If I love this person, why am I speaking in a way that makes them shrink?" That question is a mirror forcing a choice, not between right and wrong, but between causing more pain or choosing a better way to love. The moments when it's easiest to give up are exactly when we need the most courage to do the opposite. That's why the essence of EQ doesn't lie in what we feel. It's in how we interpret it. When your child screams in a supermarket, the shame doesn't come from the scream itself, but from the creeping thought, "Everyone thinks I'm a bad parent." When your partner forgets your birthday, the real sting isn't in the forgetting. It's in the story you tell yourself. They don't care anymore. In truth, events are neutral. It's our perception that fuels the emotion. Once you see that, you stop being a victim of your feelings and start holding the res. To sharpen this awareness, try this surprisingly powerful exercise. Think of a recent moment that upset you. Write down 4 things. What happened? How did you feel? What story did you tell yourself about it? What's another softer, more neutral way to see it? This isn't about thinking positive. It's about untangling the inner knots. You might be surprised how quickly the original emotion fades, simply because you looked at it differently. And then you'll realize how we act at home isn't just about now. It's a living lesson for the children who watch us every day. The real question is, if your child could hear how you speak to your spouse, your parents, your friends, would they learn something kind? Are you passing down a healthy emotional language or repeating wounds that were never healed? Because mastering EQ doesn't begin with books or lectures. It starts with being present in the tiniest moments, pausing 3 seconds before lashing out, looking into your partner's eyes instead of just hearing their words, sitting beside your child as they cry, not to stop the tears, but to say, "I'm here." EQ isn't a trick for controlling emotion. It's the courage to choose kindness even when your emotions scream otherwise. And if one day you slip, you lash out, you lose your cool, you hurt someone you love, don't beat yourself up. That too is part of the path. EQ isn't a destination where you become unshakable. It's a journey where you grow through every mistake. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to keep moving toward kindness. One step, one choice, one moment at a time. When you build emotional intelligence at home, where there's no spotlight, no applause, just the rawness of real human emotion, you lay a foundation within yourself. And that foundation will follow you into the world. It will keep you steady, not because you're trying to prove anything, but because you know who you are. And from that, real confidence grows, quiet, grounded, and strong, like a presence that speaks for itself in every conversation. Here's a hard truth. Most of us don't lack communication skills. We're just too scared to use them. It's not that you don't know how to speak. It's that you're afraid if you speak honestly, you'll be judged. If you show up as yourself, you'll be rejected. A lack of confidence isn't a skill gap. It's a wound in your sense of worth. And Stoicism, if you're brave enough to practice it properly, is a bitter but deeply effective remedy. Stoics don't try to become confident. They strip away everything that blocks the confidence already inside them, like light hidden behind a curtain. You don't need to find the light, just remove what's covering it. Confidence isn't something you acquire. It's what remains when you're no longer bound by other people's expectations. You walk into a room and see a group chatting animatedly. In your head, a voice whispers, "What should I say so I don't sound stupid? Or how do I impress them without trying too hard?" That voice isn't you. It's your social survival instinct. So you retreat, pretend to text, and stay quiet. When deep down, what you really want is to connect. Emotional intelligence doesn't begin with smoothness. It begins with the courage to face your fear. What does Stoicism teach here? Not how to make people like you, but how to stay grounded when your craving for approval kicks in. Imagine you're carrying an invisible name tag into every conversation. On it is the question, "Am I enough?" Every word, gesture, and glance revolves around that silent plea. A Stoic doesn't smash the name tag. They simply realize it has nothing to do with their true worth. Epictetus once said, "Attach yourself to what is spiritually superior, regardless of what other people think or do." In practice, that means you can get interrupted in a meeting, make a joke no one laughs at, get ghosted after a date, and still remain steady. Because your value is not on the auction block of other people's reactions. Sounds empowering, but how do you actually live it? Very tangibly. Before a big conversation, a job interview, a presentation, a party, write down 3 things you can't control: people's gazes, their reactions, and the outcome. Then write down 3 things you can: your attitude, the clarity of your words, and your ability to truly listen. Just recognizing what's yours to carry lifts half the pressure. Real confidence doesn't come from "I'm good enough." It comes from "I can live with being imperfect." High emotional intelligence isn't about winning every conversation. It's about being able to walk away from awkward moments without punishing yourself. Ever ruminated after a date? "Why did I say that? I sounded so dumb." That's when you need Stoicism the most. Not to judge yourself, but to reassess and move forward. You don't need to own the room. You need to own your reaction when the room doesn't go your way. When someone looks at you coldly, when a group tunes you out, you have the right not to spiral. You don't know what's going on in their heads, and you don't need to. Your job is to stay present with what you're saying. Speak because it matters to you, not because you want applause. Don't try to build social confidence by mastering tricks or manipulating body language. Build it from the ground up. Do you believe what you have to say is worth hearing? If not, then read more. Live more deeply, think more clearly. Confidence doesn't come from speaking like Steve Jobs. It comes from having something real to say. And if you feel like you don't yet have anything to say, that's okay too. Silence can be a form of confidence as long as it's not driven by fear. You have the right to listen, observe, and smile without feeling the need to chime in just to be seen. Confident people don't chase attention. They're simply unafraid of being overlooked. Here's a simple image. You are a glass of water. If the glass is empty, you'll crave being filled by attention, praise, and damnation. But if it's full, you approach others to share, not to be topped up. Stoicism is the art of filling your glass from within. And how do you fill it? With discipline. One of the hardest but most powerful exercises after every social interaction that leaves you unsettled, write this down. What made me uncomfortable? How did I respond? And next time, how would I like to respond differently? Not to blame yourself, but to guide yourself. Over time, you'll build a steadier version of you, and confidence won't be something you have to build. It'll be who you are. Can you enter a conversation without trying to prove anything? Walk into a dialogue like you're already enough. Face being ignored, rejected, ghosted, and still believe in your worth. If so, you're not just learning a social skill. You're living a philosophy. You're living like a Stoic. And if there are moments when you feel like you can't hold it together, when the world pushes back, emotions spiral, your inner world feels chaotic, you're not alone. Most personal crises begin with something seemingly small, being ignored, saying the wrong thing, being misunderstood. But if left unresolved, those small cracks grow into deep fractures. That's why we need to move into the next lesson. Handling personal crisis with emotional intelligence, where Stoicism stops being theory and becomes the thread that holds you together. When everything inside feels like it's falling apart. There are days when you wake up feeling heavy-hearted. Even though the sky is blue and the birds are singing, your unread messages pile up. Your meeting schedule is a fortress, and you feel like you're sprinting with no clear destination. In those moments, what breaks a person isn't a massive crisis, but the slow bleed of constant pressure, always there, always tightening. Modern society tells you to be strong, quick, and adaptable. But who teaches you how to stay grounded through the repeated tremors that quietly wear you down? The answer isn't in glossy self-help books. It lies in ancient wisdom, like Stoic philosophy, which may look dry on the surface, but holds deeply practical power. You might think emotional intelligence is a modern invention, a tool for office life and leadership training, but the Stoics understood its essence long ago. They just called it something else. They talked about mastering the mind, observing emotions rather than being ruled by them, and maintaining integrity no matter how chaotic life becomes. And if that sounds abstract, let's bring it down to earth into everyday life, where emotional intelligence stops being theory and becomes survival work. Start with something tangible, your job. Have you ever sat in front of your computer? Hands trembling from a looming deadline, nerves frayed from a tense meeting. Most of us panic in that moment. We spiral, lose control, rush, or freeze. But someone trained in emotional intelligence pauses, not to deny their anxiety, but to face it. I'm anxious, I'm afraid. Naming the feeling is the first step to breaking its hold. When you label an emotion, you create space between you and it. When you take a deep breath, as if reining in a wild horse, you signal to your body, I'm in control, not the emotion. You break the task into parts. Focus on one action, send an email. Finish a slide, and step by step you pull yourself out of the quicksand of overwhelm. But work stress, however intense, is just the surface. The real quakes come from within. Family breakdowns, losing someone, financial collapse, betrayal. Things that can't be fixed overnight, things that shake the very core of your being. What makes this kind of pain dangerous isn't its intensity, but its persistence. It's the way you hide it because you don't want to look weak. It's how you react defensively with anger, avoidance, judgment instead of admitting I'm hurt. This is where emotional intelligence becomes the ability to sit with yourself, not to wallow, but to observe. You write down what you feel, you accept that you're lost, and then you ask, what's still within my control? Maybe it's how you eat a meal, how you talk to your child, how do you politely decline a gathering you have no energy for? Every small action becomes a quiet declaration. I'm still standing. And here's a truth we often miss. Emotional recovery doesn't come from avoiding pain. It comes from walking through it with mindful presence. When you dare to feel without letting those feelings dictate your actions, you build a flexible armor, resilient yet unbreakable. Have you ever felt so drained that you didn't want to do anything? Not out of laziness, but from a deep bone-level exhaustion. Burnout doesn't happen from one late night. It's the result of constantly pushing yourself. No breaks, no rest, no boundaries. Ironically, it's often the most capable, responsible people who burn out because they always think they can carry more. But the body doesn't lie. It speaks through restless sleep, mindless eating, and sudden irritability. Ignore those signs and the body will scream through illness. So what's the fix? Not luxury vacations or weekend spa trips. It's the art of setting boundaries with your work, with your phone, with people who keep taking. It's the ability to say no without guilt. It's choosing with intention to make space for recovery. Silencing notifications, walking alone, sitting still with a cup of tea. You might wonder, what good does that do? But ask yourself, when was the last time you were truly alone without feeling restless? Chronic stress doesn't just wear down your mind, it wrecks your body. Studies link it to heart disease, digestive disorders, and even cancer. But you don't need data to know that. You feel it in headaches, shallow sleep, and snapping at loved ones. When you don't regulate your emotions, you grasp for control in destructive ways, overing, drinking, and scrolling mindlessly. Instead, you can choose healthy responses, simple ones. 10 deep breaths before reacting, a 15-minute morning walk, writing down 3 things you're grateful for each night. These small daily actions quietly build a foundation of inner strength. You won't see the results right away, but they will hold you up when everything else falls apart. There's a crucial question to ask. Are you living in a way that makes you stronger, or just surviving so you don't fall apart? The difference is this. The strong build their resilience daily. The surviving brace for the next hit. The Stoics didn't wait for a crisis to practice control. They trained constantly. Every tough conversation, every negative emotion, every unforeseen challenge was their training ground. And this is where EQ stops being theory and becomes a way of life. It's not about knowing emotions. It's about choosing your response when everything is crashing down. It's about not snapping at someone just because you're tired. It's about knowing when you're close to burnout and having the courage to say so. It's about holding your character intact whether you win or lose. This isn't just Stoic philosophy. It's written in scripture too, from a time when people crossed deserts barefoot and survived on belief. We rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. That's not shallow comfort for the faint-hearted. That's a blueprint for surviving a brutal world without breaking apart. Because yes, you will hurt, you will fall. But if you stay with the pain, if you don't run, you will build endurance. From that endurance, character will grow. And from that character, something unexpected will appear. Hope. If you're still here, you already know EQ isn't some far-off idea. It's survival. It's how you protect yourself in a world that never stops shifting. And this journey doesn't end here, because some wounds come not from stress, but from the quiet marks left by trauma. In that space, emotional intelligence becomes not just a coping tool, but a force for healing. We'll go further, slower, deeper to uncover the strength to rebuild from within in the next lesson. Some people carry a wound their whole life that no one else can see. They keep smiling, go to work, post cheerful photos, yet inside they feel empty. A friend of mine in his 30s once said over drinks, "You know what? Every time someone goes quiet on me, I feel like I'm about to be abandoned." Turns out when he was a kid, his mother used to punish him with silence. No yelling, no beatings, just days of cold, heavy quiet. That silence eventually grew into a deep fear, the fear of being forgotten, of not being needed. Now that he's grown, no one punishes like that anymore. But whenever his partner is slow to reply to a message, he spirals. It's not jealousy, it's his past waking up. Quiet but real. That's how emotional wounds work. They don't need explosions. They're built in silence through repetition. A look of disdain, a time you cried and no one cared, or you're too sensitive repeated 10 times until you believed it. Then one day you stop crying, you stop expressing, you stop needing anyone. But that's not strength, that's numbness. And numbness is the clearest sign that someone's been hurt. What's strange is that many people think they've moved on, but often they've just shut off the feeling, like tossing a blanket over a leaking puddle. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's gone. Over time, the water spreads, and eventually it damages the whole foundation, your mind, your relationships, even how you treat yourself. At that point, emotional intelligence stops being some abstract personal development tool. It becomes the way you sit down, face what's quietly burning inside, and say, okay, I'm not abandoning myself anymore. The first step isn't healing, it's admitting there's a wound. A woman in one of my workshops once shared that she often snapped at her young son whenever he cried, not because he did anything wrong, just because the sound of his crying was unbearable to her. Then one day during class, she broke down while talking about being locked in a room every time she cried as a child. My mom used to say, crying doesn't solve anything. Come out when you've stopped. Since then, I've hated emotions. She didn't need a complex therapy plan. She just needed to see what was driving her behavior. To do that, you have to name the emotion, not vague stuff like I feel sad or I'm tired. Try, I feel abandoned. I feel not good enough. I feel like I'm shrinking. Naming the feeling is like turning on the light in a dark room, and light is always the beginning of healing. I have a friend who writes letters to his 10-year-old self. Not poetic ones, just something like, hey, I know back then it felt like no one had your back, but I'm here now. The first time he did it, he stared out the window and cried like a kid, because that was the first time in his life he didn't ignore his own feelings. So what's next? You need a safe space where emotions can show up without being judged. Maybe there's no one around to give that to you, but you can create your own refuge. Some people meditate, some cook, some walk in the park every morning. Another friend of mine sketches his emotions daily in messy little drawings. They're not pretty, but they're real, and that's what matters, being fully yourself. One technique that helps retrain the brain is to rehearse old situations with new reactions. Say you usually freeze when your boss yells. Try imagining that scene again, but this time you don't shrink. You don't fight back either. You just breathe, stay present, and let the wave pass. Keep replaying it that way, and eventually your brain will start to associate that memory with calm control, not fear. Like a child who once lived in chaos, now drawing a warm home with yellow lights and saying, this is where I want to live. You're not lying to your brain, you're rewiring it, and there's solid science behind this. You don't need to read research papers to start. You just need to slow down a little, notice, name, breathe with your emotions. Because if you don't look at the wound, it doesn't disappear. It just hides. Carl Jung called it the shadow. The parts of ourselves we reject, call weak. They show up in unconscious ways like overreacting to feedback because you were once micromanaged or laughing too quickly to cover a need for love. Then we project that shadow onto others. Judging someone for being sensitive when we were never allowed to be soft, distrusting people because we're terrified of being left. We think we're living in the present, but we're really responding to a past that never got a proper ending. The danger is when we start mistaking these defense mechanisms for our identity. I'm just logical, we say. But really, our emotions were once mocked. I'm independent, we claim, when it's just fear of being abandoned again. Every time we let the shadow drive us without realizing, it grows. Until one day, it's no longer a shadow. It's the dark room we've lived in so long, we mistake it for light. And that's when emotions begin to freeze. You stop feeling anger. You stop feeling love. You don't know what you want anymore. Can't tell real sadness from echoes of old wounds. You don't feel. You just react with coldness, with distance, with polite smiles that touch no one, not even yourself. You've probably met people who seem like they've moved on but can't trust, can't cry, can't listen without defensiveness. Their feelings are frozen, not in pain, but not truly alive either. They take pride in being strong, but they're just numb, not loving, not hating, not wanting. Real strength isn't being unshaken. It's facing the pain without running and choosing the response that makes you respect yourself, not the one that wounds you more. Seneca wrote, "There are more things likely to frighten us than there are to crush us." We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. We suffer more from what we imagine than from what actually happens. That doesn't dismiss our emotions. It gives us power. If feelings can be imagined, they can be reimagined in gentler, kinder, healing ways. And when you're steady enough not to be swept away by old memories, you start seeing the present more clearly. You realize not every cold person will leave you. Not every argument ends in heartbreak. You begin connecting again honestly, not out of fear of losing someone, but from a true desire to be present. Healing isn't a destination, it's how you live, showing up for your real emotions without running or going numb. And when you've walked that path far enough, something powerful happens. You begin not just to live well with yourself, but to lead the relationships around you. That's when you'll need the next lesson, advanced social strategies. Not for chasing success from a self-help book, but for understanding people, understanding yourself, and building influence without manipulation. Success doesn't belong to the smartest person in the room, nor is it reserved for the hardest working. In the real world, success favors those who understand one simple truth. People don't act on logic, they act on emotion. And if you don't learn to navigate emotions, yours and others, you'll find yourself stuck in silent conflicts, polite nods with no real support, and invisible resistance that keeps you from moving forward. Advanced social strategies aren't about smooth talk or quick fixes. They're about seeing through people without losing sight of yourself. You don't need a psychology degree, but you do need the sensitivity to notice when someone isn't speaking with words, but with attitude. Some rejections aren't verbal. They show up in eye contact, hesitation, or tone. A person under pressure won't absorb a great idea, no matter how brilliant it is. If you don't know the right emotional timing to offer a suggestion, share feedback, or tell a story, you risk being misunderstood and derailing the entire conversation. Ever been in a meeting where the air felt heavy, but no one said what they were thinking, or stood at a party smiling and chatting while realizing everyone was just playing a role? Real social strategy isn't about what's visible. It's about recognizing that everyone's wearing a mask and having the clarity not to get caught up in the performance. The colleague who jokes all the time might be terrified of losing relevance. The cold, distant boss might be under pressure they can't talk about. Seeing this doesn't make you weak. It gives you leverage. The first skill to master, filter your emotions before speaking your ideas. Not to be fake, but to be effective. When you feel dismissed, overlooked, or manipulated, you might want to react, but how you react matters. The Stoics teach us, never respond with mood, respond with vision. When treated unfairly, the average person gets angry. The experienced one stays silent. The wise one uses that moment as a stepping stone to rise. Anger is a debt you create and pay back yourself. You have the right to feel it, but you also have the responsibility not to inflict it. That's emotional leadership, not avoidance, but guidance. A young employee once shared how her team lead kept cutting her off during meetings. She nearly quit feeling disrespected, but instead of rage quitting, she asked for a one-on-one. She said, "I'd like to understand why I'm often interrupted. Am I unclear in how I present?" The team lead didn't react as she feared. After a pause, he admitted, "I'm sorry. I've been under deadline stress and haven't been managing it well." One calm conversation saved a relationship and a job. Here's a real-life scenario. You pitch an idea in a meeting and a colleague subtly undermines it. The usual reflex, snap back, scoff, or silently stew. But there's another move. Stay calm. Look them in the eye and ask directly but without aggression. "I sense you have a different view. Could you share it? I'd like to understand it better." That response flips the dynamic. You shift from reactive to proactive. And those who respond, not react, hold the upper hand. especially in spaces filled with hidden power games. Often it's not what you say that wins, it's how you stay composed. Another strategy, anticipate emotions before they're expressed. Sounds hard, but it's a matter of observation. A denied raise might not provoke a reaction right away, but soon the employee pulls back, underperforms, and eventually quits without a word. An unhappy client might not complain, they might just go quiet. If you wait for emotional outbursts to act, it's too late. But if you notice the subtle cues, a long pause, lack of eye contact, a shift in tone, you can step in early and save the relationship. Sometimes all it takes is I sense you're not entirely comfortable. Can we talk privately? That single moment can show tremendous emotional intelligence. Sometimes, though, the smartest strategy is to walk away intentionally. A friend who always complains but never listens. A colleague who only calls when they need something. A relationship that demands you shrink to feel accepted. The Stoics never glorified clinging to relationships at all costs. They valued self-respect. If a connection repeatedly asks you to betray your values, it's not a bond, it's a trap. The highest strategy is letting go without resentment and stepping back without bitterness. Here's the twist. Social mastery isn't about climbing higher in others' eyes. It's about not falling when others spiral, not about beating someone, but not losing yourself. A wise person can enter a room full of critics and remain grounded. They don't try to win people. They simply refuse to betray themselves to be liked. You can practice this every day. When someone makes you feel small, don't snap. Stay calm. Choose kindness with clarity. Reply with words that are firm but not hostile, warm but not weak. When you are sidelined in a discussion, don't push your way in with words. Do it with excellence. Be so clear, so consistent, so competent they can't ignore you. One young professional shared how, instead of fighting for airtime in meetings, she began submitting detailed reports beforehand. By the third time, her manager turned to her and said, "Would you mind presenting to the team?" Quiet, steady initiative spoke louder than any interruption. Social strategy isn't for the impatient. It's a long game, and the Stoics, they were masters of it because they didn't tie their worth to how others felt. Every relationship to them was a stage to show integrity, composure, and character, and that made them stand out without trying to. Success isn't about how many people like you. It's about how many people respect you, even if they don't like you. And that happens only when you master the art of expressing yourself without imposing, listening without submission, confronting without attacking, and communicating without losing your core. No strategy surpasses living authentically, mindfully, and with boundaries. Stoics don't speak to win hearts. They speak to stay true, and that alone sets them apart in a world addicted to likes. Now you see, success doesn't go to the cleverest or the most talented. It goes to those who live deeper, relate smarter, and lead themselves better. That's the quiet power that endures. And when you master it, you won't need to fit in. People will seek you out. Of course, no one's perfect from day one, but every conversation, every conflict, every reaction is a training ground. And if you truly live the Stoic spirit, you'll see this isn't a one-time tactic. It's a lifelong art. And that's the point. Because emotional intelligence and social mastery aren't destinations. They're the beginning. The next lesson, seeing emotional intelligence as a lifelong journey, is where you'll understand. We don't train to be perfect. We train to never quit. And that path, no one can walk it for you. We aren't born to master our emotions. We are born to feel them. Fear, anger, instinctive reactions that have kept us alive. But to truly live, not just survive like weeds blown by the wind, but to grow like a tree rooted deep and rising through every storm, requires more than instinct. It demands practice. It demands reason. It demands a lifelong journey of refining our mind, our emotions, and the way we show up in this world. The Stoics understood this well. For them, emotional intelligence wasn't a trendy skill. It was proof of inner dignity. We're living in an era where emotions are manipulated for profit. Likes, shares, comments, clickbait. Everything is engineered to hijack your feelings and capture your attention. Anger, outrage, anxiety, they're all being pushed to the max. In a world like this, the simple act of slowing down, noticing your emotions, and responding with calm awareness is a quiet rebellion. And the astonishing thing is it doesn't happen in a single moment. It takes years of repetition, journaling, breathing exercises, listening deeply, accepting feedback, and sometimes just sitting still with discomfort instead of pushing it away. When everything outside grows louder, the only thing left in your control is the clarity within. That's when you return to a deceptively simple question, one most people avoid. What am I really feeling right now? Do you feel angry when criticized? Do you shrink when misunderstood? Do you blame others when you don't feel loved? These reactions aren't wrong, but if you don't examine them, you'll remain their slave. We don't learn emotional intelligence to appear mature. We learn it to free ourselves from being unconsciously controlled by emotion. Like a sailor steering a ship, you can't stop the waves, but you can adjust your sails. And sometimes the bravest act isn't confronting others, but sitting with your own anger, sadness, or envy, like facing an old friend you've ignored for too long. Emotional journaling is how you name the waves, because what you can name, you no longer fear. A Stoic writes not to complain, but to dissect themselves with the blade of reason. Maybe today you were angry at being overlooked in a meeting, but are you really mad at them? Or are you secretly judging yourself as worthless? EQ begins when you dare to question your own emotions. Emotions aren't facts, they're signals. Just as a fever isn't a disease but a symptom, the wise don't suppress emotions, but neither do they blindly follow them. Deep breathing isn't about calming down. It's about remembering you're alive, and you can choose a different response. One breath before reacting can change the outcome of an entire conversation. It can stop a fight. It can save a friendship. Just breathing. Yes. But remember, you've never made a wise decision while gasping for air. Imagine this. Every time you stay calm while someone else is angry, you build another fold in your inner strength. Every time you ask, am I reacting from old wounds? Instead of blaming the other person, you win over yourself. And to the Stoics, that's the only victory that counts. Victory over the self. But here's what no one tells you. This journey has no graduation day. There's no finish line, only practice. And every new day is another stage to train on. You won't always get it right. Some days you'll lose it and say things you regret. But if you're willing to reflect, then even those days aren't losses. They're growth. That's why weekly habits matter. Not just daily journaling, but revisiting emotional moments from the past week. Because we don't learn from experience. We learn from reflecting on experience. Choose a moment, an argument, a lapse in patience, or a time you stayed silent when you should have spoken. Break it down. The only question to hold on to is, could I handle it better next time? Don't wait for your emotions to explode before learning to manage them. Train while you're at peace, like a soldier practicing daily, not just in battle. Listen to others, not to make them feel better, but to sharpen your own humility, to stop projecting, to stop judging, to truly be present in the relationship. EQ isn't about pleasing people. It's about adjusting yourself to create space for others to be themselves without losing who you are. The long-term strategy, treat yourself as a work in progress. Set EQ goals like you would fitness goals. Consistent, structured. Pick one trait, patience, listening, clarity and communication, and train it in everyday interactions. No theory beats practice, and no practice is more valuable than daily life. You won't see progress unless you track it. Write down moments when you kept your cool. Positive feedback from coworkers or loved ones. Times you were about to lose it but didn't. These may seem small, but they are the building blocks of solid emotional intelligence. Over time, you'll look back and realize you're not the same person you were a year ago. Find someone who gives you feedback, someone you trust to tell you the truth. Someone brave enough to say you avoid conflict or you interrupt a lot. Don't get defensive. Thank them. They're showing you what the mirror can't. They're helping you stay on the path. This journey is long, and sometimes it feels hopeless. You'll have days when you wonder why bother learning EQ in a world full of people who don't care. But that's exactly when you need to remember. You're not learning EQ to change the world. You're learning it so the world doesn't change you for the worse. That's the deepest kind of freedom. Not everyone will understand you. Not everyone will return your patience with gratitude. That's okay. Stoics don't do what's right for recognition. They do it because it's right. And if you still have doubts, ask yourself, aren't the people you admire most the ones who manage their emotions well? The ones who speak with calm, compassion, and clarity? If that's who you want to become, then EQ isn't optional. It's a personal responsibility. There is no graduation day for emotional intelligence, no final milestone where you can say, I've mastered this. The further you go, the more you realize how much more there is to understand, to restrain, to empathize with. That's not failure, it's awakening. Like Paul wrote to the Philippians, not that I have already obtained all this or have already arrived at my goal, but I press on. That isn't just about faith, it's about anyone serious about living well. You'll stumble, you'll lose your patience, but don't stop. As long as you keep asking, can I do better next time? You're still on the path, and that path, however long it is always worth walking. We've just explored 14 powerful ways to master emotional intelligence and social skills through the lens of Stoic philosophy. Not as a list of quick tips, but as a disciplined inward journey of deep personal growth. We began by understanding what emotional intelligence really means. Then we turned inward to recognize ourselves, to learn how to regulate emotions rather than be swept away by them. We trained ourselves to read social cues, to cultivate empathy, to spark inner motivation, and to communicate with intention even when disagreements arise. We brought EQ into our workplaces, our homes, and our everyday conversations. We practiced staying grounded in crisis, facing emotional wounds, building confidence, and applying real-world social strategies to keep growing. And finally, we realized emotional intelligence isn't a destination. It's a path with no finish line where each day offers a chance to live with more depth, to understand others more clearly, and to gain just a bit more mastery over ourselves than we had yesterday. That's how the Stoics lived, and it's how you can live too if you're brave enough to start. If this video sparks something in you, a question, an awakening, or even just the sense that I need to go deeper, leave a like and hit subscribe. Not just to catch the next video, but to remind yourself you're on a journey and you're not walking it alone. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you in the next one.